Hello again, everybody. I'm Sylvain Rochon, and this is another episode about writing Engineering Paradise. So the second book, again, where I'm creating an ideal world, what the ideal world could look like. And in this one, we're talking about the creation of the Ministry of Security. Last week, I was talking about the Ministry of Justice, which includes, all the domestic security items, the courts, the prisons, and law enforcement in general, right? And how we could minimize it, make it smaller, unbiased, further unbiased, and also more efficient, more beneficial, more human-centric, right? Take care of the people, because the objective of all these ministries is to take care of the people. Now, the Ministry of Security is slightly different because it looks outwardly. It's a little bit like the national security, for example, that we see in a lot of countries. There's these terminologies, the national defense. There's all these. I just call it Ministry of Security just to blanket it, because we can call it whatever we want. It has, in this case, it has two aspects to it. You have information gathering, and you have the actual defense force itself, because this is outward looking. You're looking at Ministry of Security that is, of course, it deals also with domestic cases in a certain way, but its main function is more to protectionism from outside force or outside threat, outside the nation that can come in, for example. Especially the defense force. Now, the information gathering agencies, or the information gathering division, we already have something like that with CSIS in Canada. We have the the CIA in the States, Israeli Mossad, MI6 in UK, and so on. These are agencies that are information gathering and also, of course, counterintelligence. The way I don't want to compare completely with these organizations, because they are run very differently and they do very different things. But what I want to say about these, that these should be as open to the population, to the citizenship as possible. You remember the online platform I was talking about? This is true for every ministry. You want to have as much information as possible on there. You want to have transparency, because they work for the citizens, right? They work for the people to protect us, or to apply justice, to make sure that everything's running smoothly, and then our rights and our basic needs are provided for. That's why they are part of the government. It's something that has to be unbiased. It has to be applied equally to everybody in the nation, right? Now, again, we can't really automate a whole lot of things there initially, but this is going to be a work in progress as far as automation. But there are things that we can do to make these smaller. Again, I keep talking about AI. Well, if you talk about information gathering and AI, they go hand in hand. And most information agencies have been and are continuing to use a lot of intelligence software to gather information. I think this is a great application for AI that is already available, and it's only going to get better with time. The thing that I want to point out for our purposes, and perhaps something that is different from other information gathering like CIA and so on, is that we want them to focus exclusively on the proactive defense of the citizenship through information gathering only. The defense force can handle the physical stuff. So the information gathering division, it's for information gathering and counterintelligence, which is also information gathering and identifying threats. So it's there to analyze and gather information for security purposes. So it can feed information to the law enforcement agencies and back and forth. It can leverage information from, remember all the drones I mentioned last week that were used perhaps for the police force. Well, the information gathering division can use their own drones as well, but if you have collaboration with the databases, then you have eyes and ears everywhere. So the information gathering division can pull information from all that, use AI to do analysis, and then identifying potential threats and people of interest for the different agencies, whether domestic or foreign, can look into. Now, if it's a domestic person of interest, police or law enforcement can perhaps receive the information and domestically take a look at things and keep an eye on things. That's great. If it's information from a potential threat from outside of the country, whether it's our own citizens from this particular nation or citizens from another nation that may want to harm us from outside, it could be cyber attacks, could be physical attacks, whatever it is. Well, that information would be fed to the defense division. And their job would be to protect us from outside threats. You see what I mean? But information gathering is about just that. We don't want to have any black operations from the information gathering divisions. That's no bueno. We know that in modern times, if governments do these things, it is kept, of course, very, very secret. But if the word goes out, the population is almost always outraged. We are past that time when all this spy stuff, this spy stuff that we see in movies sometimes actually happens, or is something that the population want. We do need defense, not preemptive strikes against other nations. And that's my main point for this particular video. In the ideal world, it's like we want to lower stress levels. That's part of a basic human need, and we want this to be for every country. If other countries have high stress levels because of our actions, they have a higher chance of being aggressive and thus planning and plotting and doing attacks. That doesn't mean that even in the lowest stress levels around the world, there won't be any crazy people or dictators or anybody that have, for whatever crazy idea they have in their mind, they want to do harm to others. That's why you need a defense force. And you also need a force, ideally, you need an international police force that is composed of various, perhaps, branches or divisions of the different nations' defense force to cover international issues or even disasters, for example. Because protection of people is not necessarily from potential terrorists or potential dictators, dictator aggressors, or things like that, or even like small cells of individuals with different ideologies, whatever it is. It's also natural disasters. And it just turns out that military people have an innate desire to defend. But it doesn't need necessarily to defend using a shotgun or using a machine gun. That's usually putting themselves more at risk because you're dealing with other humans, perhaps. They want to defend it. If there's a tsunami somewhere, I'm sure they would feel very proud at defending the lives of people from a natural disaster to help them out. And I'm sure they do actually feel very, very happy to do that. That's part of their DNA in some way, right? And we can, of course, use a lot of automated systems and drones and mechanical devices to help out doing that. We don't need as many human beings being in that military force. Just like we don't need a whole lot of people in information gathering if all we do is, in fact, truly gather information. We don't want to be provocative in our defense or too preemptive in our defense because that creates more aggression. I guess that's the point I'm making. So if we center our defense in like drawing a line in the sand, if you will, or at the border of a nation, it's like the defense force will protect us from here. If it's provided with awesome intelligence that we know something is coming, the military can be positioned in the right way, maybe in between countries. The nation from which an attack may come from can be notified by the Foreign Affairs Division, and something can be negotiated in collaboration between the two nations' friendly defense forces, and even the international force, which is, again, a collaboration between different nations, can come in and thwart the threat in collaboration with the nation's law enforcement. Now, if a nation decides that where there's a threat that wants to come out or do something, asks for help, then come on in. The defense force from another nation that was invited can go in and do something and help out. No problem there because they've been invited. But there should be no more arbitrary attacks because we want to go into this country. You don't invite us, but we're going to go there anyway and try to kill this terrorist group or whatever it is. That is absolutely terrible as an idea, and historically it's always been worse afterwards because more terrorism comes out afterwards. And I put in some links in my report, but some expert individuals have analyzed our activities in the last number of years about this. And this type of action has created a political nightmare of confrontations between nations, so making foreign affairs or any kind of deals or trade very difficult. It's created also animosity from citizens from other countries towards some countries that are seen more as bullies as others, with a number of bases around other nations. And the fact is that it just doesn't help. The benefits of being proactive and threatening in modern times are insignificant compared to the harm that it does to the country that does it. And there was a great article in Time magazine about this, and entitled "Why We Should Close America's Overseas Military Bases." Okay? And the author is Robert Pape from the Chicago University. And sorry, no, that's another article where they, Robert Pape is from University of Chicago, said the principal cause of suicide terrorism is resistance to foreign occupation. Okay, no, the article from the Time actually is from John Glazer. Okay, I found it. All right, and he lists seven reasons why we should close America's overseas bases. And America has 800 of them around all sorts of countries, including North Korea, China, countries that are Russia, that are considered an enemy or dangerous. And they are not worth the expense. They are actually causing more harm to the states than they are doing good to their foreign policies, their economy, to everything. Okay, here they are. I'm just going to list them real quick. They don't protect the homeland from direct attack. In modern times, there's a lot of ways to do direct attacks. We've seen it with different terrorism attacks. 9/11 is one of them. It doesn't protect you from anything like that. ICBMs, like intercontinental missiles, like North Korea has developed the technology to do that. It can send nuclear missiles to American mainland. Having bases all around North Korea doesn't prevent them from doing that. So that's what they mean. So you can go, you have a direct attack on a nation from almost anywhere in the world, a base around them that is threatening with missiles looking in, does not help prevent those direct attacks. Second point, their deterrence effect is overrated. You know, a lot of people are seeing, well, there's all these bases, they're all positioned on the map, and that has to be a deterrent. Apparently, not so much. Not so much anymore. People got used to it, and they get angry and frustrated. They kind of ignore it. They know politically that an attack on a country, you know, that is unprovoked, even though it does happen still, is a political nightmare. So it's not that big of a deal. And you have to, there has to be an attack for these bases to be useful in the first place. So it's not a deterrent. Okay. At least it's overrated. The third point, they don't always effectively prevent nuclear proliferation. Again, we've seen it. Iran, North Korea, they still develop their programs. In fact, they develop their programs to prevent American attack, apparently justified or unjustified, by being a nuclear threat. If you show that you can harm the U.S., I'm just choosing that country because that's the biggest one in the bloc. If you show that you can harm it severely from where you are, then there's a good chance that your country will not attack you. Syria, Libya, Iraq did not have any means to attack the Americans, especially not in a nuclear way, so the Americans felt no problem attacking, but they haven't been attacking North Korea at all, or Iran at all, for lots of reasons, and part of it is about their nuclear program. So having bases all around those countries does not help in preventing nuclear proliferation. It still happens. Okay. Number 4, they can encourage resentment. I just mentioned that. A lot of countries don't like the U.S., especially in the Middle East, especially in some countries in Asia, like China. Those countries that the U.S. are trying to to intimidate. It causes resentment in the population. It causes the rise of terrorism against the oppressor, against the country that is resented, from the population and sometimes from the government itself. It doesn't protect the American citizen. It actually causes more harm. Number 5, they can cause the U.S. to support brutal dictatorships. But that's more of a political aspects. It's, you know, there are some deals that happen, like if the U.S. or another country wants to put a base near a potential enemy that they want to pressure economically or militarily. Sometimes deals have been made with dictators because they're more agreeable to put bases there in exchanges for something else. Well, that's supporting the dictatorship in exchange for oppression of another country, and it's happened many, many times. And that's just not bad. It's not good policy. 6, they risk entangling us in unnecessarily wars. Yeah. The example of Korea is typical. If North Korea chooses to attack South Korea, automatically they know they'll bring in the States because the Americans have a base there. So they're going to be protecting American citizens and American soldiers, and they'll automatically they're drawn into that war, whether they want it or not. It's the same with all countries where they have bases. And the 7th one, technology has largely made them obsolete. I brought that up in the first point. So what we want is we want a military that is entirely defensive, fed profusely by information gathering. And with the information gathering entity, I would recommend tying them further together. They already are, like they have Interpol, but also you have some back channels between each information gathering entity today to share information, and we can augment that, especially if the stress levels are lower between countries and there's a lot less stress in an ideal world. Then there is probably a lot more willingness for information gathering entities of different nations to collaborate and share information a lot more widely. It gives them, because of the lower stress levels and less danger, they're more comfortable at calling things that should be released to the public versus keeping them secret and for the reasons of national security. That's a lot of BS a lot of the times. It's just a justification to keep things secret for too long. So information release legislation, in which we already have some, should be even, we should have even more of those, so that the population is immediately or almost immediately aware of operations made by the Defense Department or law enforcement and all these things as very, very soon after the operation is over. Because of course we need some level of information retention in the security space to accomplish certain visions to defend properly. But once that's over, the information should be released to the population, because we are the judge, we are the employee, and we are very well informed already and well educated in general. So we can take it, and we should know what our government is doing, even if it's security. It just has to make sense. And that would also, if those reports are released fairly quickly, it would increase trust in those agencies and what they're doing. And then the population can feed back relatively soon after an operation, guiding the agency, the government, and the ministries as to what is the population wants us to get involved in later on in a new operation or in a new effort to protect. So the information needs to actually go back to the population, back and forth, just like with all the ministries. Anyway, so those are my ideas, and that's more or less what I wrote down. I'll be adjusting and writing more, of course. In the next few weeks, I'll be talking about some other ministries. I believe I have 4 others I need to talk about until we get to the massive economy section of it all that will calculate how this all can work financially and with all the resources we have inside the nation. And until then, I wish you well, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.